nuclear weapons, which could be devastating. And I do think that we should try to make the thing work in Switzerland. If not, we should go to comprehensive sanctions, because we really make it difficult for them given the level of support so far this process has. And then we should see what happens then. I think it is counterproductive while these talks are going on in Switzerland to talk about what would happen if everything fails.
President Obama went to the University of Cairo in an attempt to open a new page in the relations between the United States and the Arab.
Well, I'll say a little something about that, but let's talk about the present, because that's more important. I think, first of all, at least, unless I misunderstood both him and the explanation of his speech that I got in my personal briefing from the Secretary of State, I think he was talking about 2 years from the recommencement of peace talks. Is that right, Jim? I believe that is accurate. So I don't think he was presuming to, given the fact that the Gaza thing had just finished and you didn't have a new Israeli government until I think April of this year. I think the 2-year thing, I wouldn't pay too much attention to that. I think he did go there trying to reach out to the Arab world and to the Muslim world. And I think it was an altogether appropriate thing to do. I think that some people in Israel heard some things he said, given the venue in which he said them, in ways that contributed to the difficulty inherent in the second question you asked me. But again, I would say, you know, you all need to understand that some of us have spent more years and put in more time and heard more debates than others. I wouldn't overreact to that. There is, you should want the American president to be widely respected among the non-terrorist, non-destructive Muslims of the world. You should want the American president to be able to make the most of the fact that there is almost complete Arab solidarity behind the notion that they should form a future and genuine partnership with Israel if peace is made with the Palestinians. Because they now are worried about Iran, and they think it's a much bigger problem, and they don't need you as a whipping boy to deflect popular discontent from problems within Arab countries now. So you have a chance here. This is one of the reasons I think you ought to try to get this peace deal done is I've talked to enough of these Arab leaders, and I've known enough of them for a long time, when they all signed on to the Saudi King's peace proposal. They're not just fiddling around here. They're very serious in the fact that the only good thing I can think of, about the Iranian issue being unresolved is that you still have a high level of anxiety channeled into positive feelings toward Israel. They really do understand now that if this issue with the Palestinians could be resolved, that the whole future would be different. And I don't think you should minimize that. I said yesterday to some people over at the event I did at the Rabin Center, you know, I can conceive of the whole economic engine of the Middle East shifting to a partnership between Israel, a new state of Palestine, a more liberated Lebanon, and the Gulf states, making this the first clean energy area of the world, generating all these new jobs and new technology and doing all this stuff that Shai Agassi and others are trying to do when you all start driving around in your 100,000 electric cars before everybody else in the world does. Look, you can rewrite the future, not just the past. And so that's my take on this.
You are the most optimistic person in this hall, I'm afraid. Talking about the Secretary of State, let's talk a bit about the settlement freeze. It looks as if the American demand for a complete settlement freeze boomerang. Abu Mazen cannot accept anything but a complete Israeli surrender, something which Netanyahu cannot do. how an American administration can convince the parties to step down to reality and get back to the negotiation table.
Well, it seems to me that the administration is in the right place now. And we just got to let the dust settle. That is, the United States position going back at least to the beginning of the Madrid talks, and maybe before, but certainly going back then to the end of the Bush administration, has been that we accept the general position of the UN and international law that settlement activity in the West Bank is not lawful, and it's certainly not helpful to the peace process. And President Obama asked, and his government did, they asked for total cessation.
This was the difference between previous administrations.
That's right, but he got a different response in previous administrations too. Prime Minister Netanyahu said, and this is what Hillary acknowledged in the press conference, that, okay, they want to finish these multi-story high-rises that they've got all this money in and all these contractual obligations in, but this is the first time any Israeli government has ever said, we won't issue any new permits, we won't have new settlements. As long as there seems to be a prospect for peace, we're going to finish these buildings we're working on that we permitted, and we're not going to do any more. And that should be enough to open the door to at least start talking again. That's a pretty sensible position, I think. And so, but to be fair, I understand why President Abbas and his government have been in a difficult position, because I think the Palestinians always have tended to believe that somehow if we wanted something bad enough, we could either persuade or coerce the Israeli government into doing it, and that's just factually not true. We Americans, we have to work with the politics we found in Israel, just like we have to work with the politics we found among the Palestinians. And but I think it should help that if you look at the vote of the United States House of Representatives just in the last week, and we got a lot of House members here and they can tell you more about it, but they voted something like 90 to 10. 90% of them voted to at least, I'm trying to think of a delicate way to say this, to try to limit the impact of the Goldstone report in any way, shape, or form, and not to sanction any use of it in the UN. 90% of the House of Representatives. That's the first thing they've agreed on in a bipartisan way in a long time. I mean, really, I can count on one hand the number of significant votes the House took where 90% of them voted the same way when I was president, about something of real moment, you know. So you should take some comfort in that. On the other hand, our